everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from today. I'm Cheatham, Global Marketing Director here at Third Stage Consulting Group, and I am joined by my friend and colleague, Kristy Barber, who is our Finance and Small Business Specialist. And today she's going to take us through some of, the day-to-day operations and client work that she engages in, but also how she got into kind of the consulting field. So welcome, Kristy.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so a few logistic things before we get started. As usual with our Friday Fun Day live streams, it might be Saturday where you are. So if it's Saturday, congratulations, you made it to the weekend. We'd love to know where you're joining us from. So we are streaming to YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitter. So go ahead and pop your comments, questions, and location in the chat box as we're able to see them on our Restream platform. So this always is meant to be interactive. So if you have specific questions for Kristy or myself, please feel free to drop them in the chat. But I'm really excited about this conversation, particularly because I feel like, Kristy, you don't have the linear pathway that a lot of our consultants do, because you are a very accomplished entrepreneur and from a family of entrepreneurs as well, which makes you uniquely qualified to help a lot of our entrepreneurial or small business clients. So can you kind of just give us your background? Where did you go to school? How did you get into this? Those types of things.
Yeah, so I went to school in California. It was a smaller school, like about 3,000 people. Because back in, believe it or not, I was like a really shy person, and being around a lot of people, I was like, oh, this is kind of scary. And now it's totally opposite. But even in business school, they're wanting to I always knew I wanted to have my own business or be out on my own in some capacity. And in my MBA program, one of the classes was you work with a consulting firm and you do some work for them for credit and stuff like that. And it was a really fun opportunity to just kind of test the waters of, is this really what I would like to do? Because a lot of times I think schools don't give you the opportunity to know that there's many paths to go. It's kind of more narrow in university settings of there's one or the other. And I mean, originally I started out, I wanted to be a tax accountant. And for some reason, I thought that was the path I should go down. And that changed after I graduated undergrad and trying to get a job in the accounting world. I did it for about 7 years and I just didn't enjoy it. It wasn't for me. And then and I think that made it kind of come true in master's program of working in this consulting firm and kind of dipping my toes in the water of saying, yeah, this is fun. I enjoy this. And I worked in that firm too, was a lot with manufacturing and distribution. And that's always been the industries I'm most interested in.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't believe that you were shy, because
I know, right?
you're our chameleon consultant that can go into any even very highly charged conversation and make everyone feel very comfortable. So I'm curious, when you first kind of started in consulting, was that with a bigger consulting firm, or did you kind of do it on your own?
No, it was a little firm, about 3 people is how I got started. And then kind of did a couple different career paths. That was when I still lived in California. When I moved to Denver, I went and I started working at a manufacturing company, and I was their CFO and then plant manager, and kind of went that route, and then went back to finance for a minute because I missed it, and then went out on my own and started doing more of the consulting that way.
So why do you feel like you have the affinity or skill set for those more entrepreneurial based businesses or small family owned businesses? Why is that always such a good fit for you?
I think a lot of it is that's what I grew up in. My family is very entrepreneurial. They have a variety of businesses. They've started, they've sold, they've kept, all of that. I've been around a lot of people in just different settings, and that's the environment they come from. And there's something about it that's just fun for me, of this high energy, tight deadlines, chaos, and trying to bring it all under control. I think I'm one of the few that enjoys those types of settings, and it's been fun to meet people where they're at in their business and try to help direct them to hit their future goals.
And how do you feel like helping those small businesses with technology kind of changes their overall structure? Because a lot of times, I think a lot of times we don't understand that the digital transformation space for small business is truly a business transformation. Like it's
Mhm.
almost impossible to keep that siloed as an IT project or anything like that. So I wondered if you could kind of speak to what that looks like from a technology perspective.
Yeah, because they are smaller companies, it does bleed over into the entire company. Everybody is touching it, whereas a larger company, you're going to have core groups that would be touching the IT project and nobody else would until final when you have to actually train and use it. And I think being able to understand that and then working with these smaller businesses of getting that buy-in really quickly and helping them understand, hey, this is where we're going to go. And I mean, I just got back from a trip this week, and it's a larger organization, but it's small how they function.
Hmm.
And it's really cool to see somebody saying, hey, yeah, this is my job role, but I could see where I can help in these areas too. I want to be a part of that.
Cool.
I like to welcome that in.
Yeah, that cross collaboration or cross function is definitely always great to see from our client communities because it just enhances their ability to have a successful technology implementation or business transformation for sure. So before we dive into the client work that you help us, produce here at Third Stage, how is consulting a lifestyle for you? How does it fit within your overall schedule? What's kind of a day in the life of Kristy look like?
It's probably very different than most people. um, I'm not a morning person, so I like the flexibility of I usually don't start until 9 o'clock every day. I may get up a little bit earlier and just kind of take my time. And then working throughout the day, maybe taking breaks to go to the gym or have lunch with friends, or, I do a lot of volunteer work and come back and then work some more. And there's, travel also here and there when it's necessary to go to the offices. But I like being able to work from anywhere. I can go on vacation and, well, vacation, um, work vacations. Like I went to Florida last year for a week and it was vacation, but I worked the whole time I was there. And it was nice to be able to say, hey, I'm gonna work a half day and then go out to the beach and hang out with friends and come back and visit with family, all of that. And for me, that fits my personality well. I don't like, I worked in a corporate setting for a quick minute in the finance world, and I didn't like, hey, we only work from this time to work this time, and there are no if, ands, or buts about it. And I think the consulting world allows me to adapt to a schedule that I like and where I'm
Mhm.
most creative, where I'm most productive.
Yeah, I remember when I had one of my children, I can't remember at this point, and I was up with them in the middle of the night, and I was just working, and I sent you a message, and you were like, "What are you doing up at this hour?" Usually nobody's here, but I think that's such a great piece of that balance is you really do get to make your own schedule. Is there a dark side to that? Do you ever feel like you're always connected or always on, or how do you kind of manage that?
Yeah, I think that can be a problem for me because it almost goes to the workaholic stage a little bit of, well, I want to get all of this done. And when you work at a company, it's like, hey, well, we're all done at 5 o'clock, that's it, and everybody knows. Where something like this, we're working from home or on the road, and an email comes in, it's like, well, yeah, I could answer this right now. But being able to decide what works best with your health boundaries and all of that. For a while, I was working weekends and all nights pretty much for a while, and I'm like, well, this is not the best. I'm
Yeah.
absent from things that are going around, and I need to make that more of a priority. So saying, hey, I work within these timelines or whatever these days, and taking off, not working weekends or stuff like that. I do work late at night a lot of times just because it's quiet, nobody's calling you, and you can get a lot done.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I every time we do these live streams, which is every Friday, we do kind of our meet the team so that our audience and community can learn about the different, options when it comes to being a part of our team. And it's always so funny. I feel like we're a group, a culture of corporate, defectors or disruptors. Like we many of us, though we, are very, very high go getters, a really intense type of work environment, but also we don't value that, you badge in, you badge out, those types of things, when it should be more performance based as opposed to kind of those technicalities. Do you
Hmm.
feel kind of the same way?
Yeah, I would agree, and that's something that I really enjoy about the third stage culture. It is that it's not based on what you would see if you maybe worked at a Deloitte or a more
Hmm.
larger consulting firm where you have parameters you have to go by, and it's more quantity versus quality. And I think here the culture is we want to be able to provide the best service that we can to all of our clients, and that's the focus of it, and that's what's brought down to us, and even the way that we do the work that we do.
Absolutely. I think it creates, at least for me, that kind of trust of, it doesn't, that that person is going to get back to you. Like there's no question about that, right? Like the deliverables will be quality and on time and the collaboration will be there, but it might not be exactly, in these core working hours. And I
Mhm.
always really value that piece of it is I don't have to worry about, what our colleagues will produce because I know, that they're talented in whatever subject matter area that they are. So there's no need really to, kind of micromanage on that level. And I always appreciate that autonomy as an employee myself.
Yeah.
So, what would you say to, our younger audience members? We've done a lot recently, kind of in the higher education space, and it seems as though there's a common misperception about consulting that it's not, it doesn't give you any sort of stability, and that can be a real huge value for a young person coming into the workforce. And I wondered what you thought about that.
There's a lot of stability, and it's what you want out of it. You put in what you want to get out. So there's a lot of flexibility in it. If you want to work really hard, you can have a lot of clients. If you don't want to, you can work with one or two. And I think that's where the misconception comes, that you're continually riding this roller coaster
Mhm.
of I'm making money, I'm not making money. And I don't see that to be true. And I think that's just perceptions of what people have seen with larger firms of you get on a project and the project goes for 5 years. And here our projects look a little bit different. They may go for a year, 2 years straight or something like that, or we have shorter ones that are 8 weeks, 10 weeks. And you're able to be matched to what fits best with how
Mhm.
you work. Do you like being on longer term projects? Great. Let's find, and we want to put you on those. You like the quick turnarounds like me? I'm like, hey, let's do an 8 to 10 week project. Let's see how we can get it all done and hit the timelines. Those are what I enjoy, and that's where I thrive. And
Mhm.
then we get to the next section of it, and yeah, it provides a lot of value.
How did you kind of carve out this space for yourself in this kind of niche area? It's always interesting to me, and my director peers always talking about, you're who they need, and they literally fight over you, which is
Yeah,
funny,
it's
and
funny.
that's how it works. It works here at Thursdays when you are especially talented. I was talking to Mitch last week, and I'm like, you always know the consultants that are highly valued by our clients because they're never available.
Yeah.
For things like this. And you luckily, you make time for it because I know that you're right in that very, very valued client relationship. But you are kind of unique in the fact that you really do own the small business type of role here, and then kind of that entrepreneurial, or if for lack of a more professional term, if an organization is a complete and hot mess, you're usually the one we tap to say, like, we're going to need some help here.
Yeah.
So I wondered, if you could kind of give us some insight onto how you established that role within the third stage community.
I think it comes from the lens of which I see businesses, in which I see people, and the strategy of how they come together. I think what gives me a different leg up, I guess, compared to others is having this financial background of mine that I did have, and coming
Mhm.
in and looking at things from more monetarily, but then being able to make operational decisions based off the way that the money's flowing. And it was interesting. I had a conversation about that with a client earlier this week, and we were talking about that same thing of, looking operationally, we want to do this, but I have no metrics. I have nothing to pull to be able to make these operational decisions, and I need to build a financial dashboard. And I think that's where a lot of my experience comes from, is
Mhm.
let's build this out and let's look at this whole project from a different way. And I mean, even ERP selection projects usually come of one of three ways. It's either IT driven, operational driven, or financially driven. And then I try to look at them holistically, more based off my own experience. And I think that's where it kind of changes. And then, even coming from small business and family business and all of that, trying to really get to know my clients. I don't like
Mhm.
to see people's transactions. I want to know them and keep up friendships with them. And I had that even last week. I went to dinner. One of our clients was in town and called me, and I worked on a project with them about a year and a half ago. And it's fun to still have those relationships.
And how do you balance the plethora of industries you kind of go from? Because I know you've worked in everything from textiles to agriculture to all kinds of things. I mean, you could probably rattle off a ton of different industries and verticals you've worked with. But is there a core component that you find that's kind of centralized across each business looking to implement a new technology?
Yeah, and people don't like when I say this, but at the end of the day, building a business, starting, it's not unique at all. Everybody uses the same foundation, and what becomes unique is how you service your customer, or some of how you build your end product. And that's really the only thing that's different. It's not unique. And once you learn the foundations of that, you can pretty much go into any industry and then picking up the things that are different. So, for example, aerospace and defense, it's
Mhm.
one I work in, and there's unique things to how it runs as a whole. But as you build it out, it's the same process that a food company may have of how I'm going to build something. I just have different quality checks that I have to have on an A&D space that meet government requirements.
Mhm. And from a technology or software right sizing perspective, how do you go in and say, okay, I know each business essentially and foundationally is the same, but this business needs X, Y, and Z as functionalities within a software? How do you kind of pull those out, identify them, and then help them select the best software for their organization?
So I'll go through in these workshops, and we'll start writing out. Let's do a day in the life. What do you do from start to finish? And I'll know in my head the process usually goes like this. And then hearing where they're coming from, it's like, oh, this is identified as a bottleneck right here. Let's talk more about this. What's going on, and try to figure out, a strategy around it, or a solution, or whatever, that we're going to fix it. And that's normally what I see in instances like that.
Excellent. And so you had mentioned, I'm kind of jumping all over the place before we get
Totally
to
fine.
before because I just really want to like dig into your background because I think it's so fascinating and such a huge value. So you talked a little bit about being able to have kind of those core components and understanding of how to build a business, how to make a business successful because of your family's background. Can you talk a little bit more about kind of what it was like to grow up in that entrepreneur community?
Yeah, so at 8 years old, I started working. Summers, my family, we have some retail business, and then we have agriculture, and then some other odds and ends here and there, like an accounting firm, and that. So I work there also.
Mhm.
And I think being exposed to a lot of different things at a young age was really beneficial. And my grandpa was a huge instrument in all of it, of teaching me of, hey, this is how we do things, and these are ways to, learn something else. And I remember one, I think it was in high school, you have to take an economics class, and they were teaching you how to buy stocks and mutual funds and all of that. And he taught me, he's like, here's how you research for it, and here's how you make decisions, and this is how, the companies vote, and they do things like that. And it just gave me a different perspective of how businesses work, because schools don't teach you that.
Mhm.
And learning firsthand. And I think that's where some of that spark came of, I can be so much more than what school is telling me I can be, because I don't, and I'm the rogue person too. I'm like, oh,
Oh,
rules, I like
you're
rules.
speaking my language. Yes, for sure. So,
Yeah. And there was some of that even in school of, you're telling me this is the only way that
mhm,
I can go to do what I want to do. I'm like, I don't like this.
mhm,
And then it just starts from there of learning to talk to mentors and reading books and talking to going to networking events, talking to various people
mhm.
and learning, hey, you have these skills. There's a plethora of things that you can do with these skills. And that was what kind of helped change the progression of the journey that I wanted to be on.
Yeah, I totally understand. You're preaching to the choir there. I always, whenever anyone asks me to speak at a university, I'm always like, "Are you sure you want me to
I
speak?"
know, don't choose me.
Because I'm always the first one to say, education creates a box sometimes. Although we obviously are very privileged here, specifically in North America, to have that access, which we always, are cognizant of. But a lot of times it can teach people all of the misperceptions, which is a lot of times why I like to get into higher education to have that conversation about the opportunities that come with consulting, the development of specifically women in STEM, and that type of more technology piece. And so you are literally the only woman sometimes on our YouTube channels and
Yeah.
podcasts. And so I wondered if you could kind of give us that perspective of what that journey has been, and how you would give advice to any other student or anything like that might be considering a career in technology but doesn't really have that representation of either gender, race, whatever.
Yeah, it's weird. I was actually had a conversation about this yesterday at dinner with a friend of, some projects I'm on, I'm not as respected as a male in the room. And I think, unlike most ladies, it doesn't bother me. I'm like, that's fine. I'll use somebody else in the room to be my representative,
Mhm.
and we'll plan behind the scenes, and then we'll both show up and present something, and usually that's all it takes. And
Mhm.
some of it's based on backgrounds, different countries that I've worked in, and there's different respect levels and things like that, and I respect that, even because I
For
know
sure.
a lot of people, they don't know what they don't know, and
Mhm.
they only know what they've been taught and what they've been around in their own environment. And so when something comes in and it looks different, feels different, and it's like, oh, wait a second, I don't know how I feel about this. But overall, I think I've fought very hard for every position I've ever had in my career, and also trying to come and bring a lot of value to the table, because I've seen, and I've read multiple articles, and I'm sure you've seen them too, is most ladies, whenever they want a raise, they're like, well, I don't really deserve it because I haven't done this or this. Guys will come in and be like, hey, I deserve a raise. This is how much I should get, and it should go on my next check, because the confidence levels are different when they show up to
Mhm.
the table with that. And it was an art. It really made sense to me then. I was
Mhm.
like, well, yeah, that's a good thing to like fight fight for, in respect of
Mhm.
being like, I am very valuable. I know these knowledge
Mhm.
here and there, and I deserve this just as much as my counterpart does. And so
Absolutely.
yeah, I've had that. And I think even sometimes, like, being around my own peers. So most of my friends in college, they chose different routes. They wanted to be teachers, or they want very different from what I wanted to be. And I think there was this stigma, even, that, oh, I'm just after the money, or I'm just after the limelight and all of that. And it's like, no, I'm just as passionate about what you do of teaching children. I'm
Mhm.
just teaching adults and business owners, and giving them what they need to be successful, like a teacher is, and just having people see things from a different perspective.
Absolutely. I think that's really well said in establishing your overall value and learning to have those conversations. I think a lot of us, like you and I, we really grew up within our careers in an industry that was fully male dominated. Like we almost became desensitized, and I still kind of have
Same, yeah.
look at around the room and say, "Oh, I'm the only female here." And a lot of times, I think that just becomes a normal thing. And I know you do a ton of volunteer work, and you're always up for exposing your work here on our marketing channels. And I think our message is so similar. Of there is so much room for all types of genders, backgrounds. We just had this conversation a few weeks ago at a lecture that we did about the creatives in technology. And I know yourself,
Oh, yeah.
you do photography on the side, and are very creative. So I wondered if I could kind of ask your opinion on, we obviously know that technology has a very technical side, but also has a very ingenuitive, creative, problem solving side, which you've kind of already mentioned. Do you feel like you fit in one of those, or you're kind of just a hybrid? You're a unicorn, Kristy?
Yeah, it's more of a hybrid. It's funny talk about. There's a guy, I don't know if you've ever read his book called The Nonconformist by Adam Grant.
I
And
haven't, but I
he
will
talks
write it
about
down.
it. He's a podcast too. Like if anybody's ever interested, check it out. It's really eye opening. He talks about a lot of times people that are more of that hybrid personality of you're creative but you're also strategic, is all the time people, and even school teachers, all that, they put you in this box of like you have to be one or the other. You can't be both because you can't be successful at being both. And when I read the book, I was like, oh, well, yeah, I see certain things like in my past or even currently of how people, they're not comfortable with it. And they're like, we want to shove you like over here. And I think even recognizing that of what he said in the book allowed me a lot of freedom to be like, no, I don't want to go over here where you're telling me to go. And this is why. And this is why I'll be more successful operating over here because it is creative. And I had an accounting teacher in college even tell me that. He's like, you cannot be creative and math oriented at the same time.
Mhm.
And if anybody knows me, which you've probably started to get to know me through the YouTube channels, I'm like, prove it. And I had a really successful career in Hollywood working with a lot of musicians for photography for a while. I just went on that route and wanted to do something creative, and it was fun.
That's awesome. Well, we're learning so much from your overall experience, but I think I really like your message of it doesn't have to be one way or another. I know when I went through my college career, I am terrible at math. You and I couldn't be more polar opposite on that. And they literally even told me I wasn't smart enough to, go into any of the STEM programs because I couldn't qualify with those math tests. And I've never been good at standardized tests. My brain just
Me
works
either.
differently. And I think that's true for a lot of people. But a lot of times we get put in this box of you need to do A or B, or you're not smart enough at all to do technology.
And it holds you
And
back from all the things that you could do. Because
mhm,
here's the thing, if you're taking a standardized test, all you need to know is how to memorize something. You never need to remember it again. Where if you're actually learning something, like what is it, like short answer form tests,
yeah,
I was always really good at those
yeah,
because I was like, let's talk about this and
yeah,
let's draw it out. And the other kinds, like even SAT, I just colored in the bubbles. I'm
yeah.
like, great, C sounds like a good answer, A over here, and we'll see what happens. And yeah, it was pretty terrible, but I didn't like that part of it.
Yeah, and I think that's, really what we try to say here at Third Stage is there's room for all types. We have people that specialize in, we've had people that, have had their own, small farm. We've
Yeah.
had tons of backgrounds that really do welcome that type of consulting community. And I think that's why we do these types of live streams, is just to showcase and really buck any misperception of you have to be, able to code or an engineer, or those are all great careers in general, and we always
Hmm.
welcome that background too. But there's also a ton of opportunity specifically within our change practitioners, because we always call
Oh,
them
yeah.
therapist, which I know you do. You had that whole episode. If you haven't checked out Kristy's podcast on family owned businesses, it is fascinating. She had it on our ground control podcast that will come out next week. It's featured in there. And then we also recently played it on our Digital Stratosphere podcast. So definitely check that out because it's really fascinating of just the different behavioral dynamics and human psychology dynamics that you need to be able to look at especially when working in the small business community, because it is very vulnerable in having those conversations to a small business owner.
Yeah. And these are skills, and I think we even talked about it on there of they don't teach you these things in school. They don't teach you, hey, psychology of handling clients. That would be a great class
That
to
would.
take.
We should teach it. Yeah.
Yeah, like, well, I'll get my friend, the industrial psychologist, to come
Yeah,
in
right.
and do
We
that.
should have her on the show. We would love
We
to
do.
hear about like that must be fascinating but so important. And it's so funny we've gotten to this point 2022 of our business culture when we finally realize, oh, we might need to understand how our employees work.
Yeah. Well, and even like going back to what you said of, standardized testing or even working from here, like if you have the ability to learn, and you don't have the skills today, it doesn't matter. If you have the ability to learn and pick it up, that's worth more than anything because you build it in your experience. And that's been a lot of like my whole career path. I've jumped into careers that I knew nothing about, but I would read books and talk to people, and pretty soon I'm like, okay, this makes sense.
Absolutely. I feel like you should put that line on a t-shirt and we
I
can all
should.
play it around. You probably know someone that makes t-shirts too, so
I do. We actually had a client here at Third Stage that made shirts, but I actually have a friend local that does it, which I do photography for them as well, doing different pieces of their clothing line.
very cool. Well, let's dig into a little bit about kind of your I know it's hard to like have an average client, but what typically does your client profile look like?
I would say they're usually under 150 million. Average, I would say, is around 50 million right now is what I've been working with. Um, they are either family owned or they at one time were bought out by either a PE firm or somebody else,
Mm-hmm.
and a person coming in with just a lot of vision of where they want to take the company and knowing that the systems they currently have will not get them to where they need to go.
Absolutely. And how does the team structure look like at Third Stage, and how do you integrate with the client's team structure when it comes to selecting or implementing a new technology?
So depending on the size of the project, I run a lot of solo
Mhm.
projects, or I'll have a really small team of maybe two more people, including me, based on the needs and the scope of the project. And then coming in, we'll have a project sponsor at the client's office that is our go-to person, always communicating with them. And we help them put together a small team that would be a part of the whole project. And usually that's anywhere from, 4 people to 8.
And then how do you kind of garner or gain or build that trust with the clients, in knowing that a lot of times for our small business dynamics, there can be, especially family owned, right? That we talked about, there can be one person that really is interested in this new technology, but another person that's been there for 40 years that has their spreadsheets, that's created their processes. How do you kind of bridge that gap and gain the trust of the entire organization?
A lot of it, at least for me, it's having a lot of conversations, and I may do things a little bit different than other consultants. Is I want to know you as a person first, and then as I know you as a person, I see how certain things interact in the business, or why various decisions are made, why there may be short tempers around something, or why there's a lot of joy in something else, and that kind of all comes into who we are as an individual.
Yeah, it was interesting. The other day we were interviewing Dr. Christina Serrano from CSU, Colorado State University here in Colorado, where both Kristy and I are located in the United States. And she said something interesting that I wanted your feedback on, because you do work with a lot of more individuals than many of our other bigger projects, right? They're working with maybe a project sponsor, but then an entire manufacturing team or an entire HR team, those types of things. And she said something interesting, that you as an individual have to be motivated to make that change in processes, technology, systems, those types of things, in order for it to be successful. And that was something I hadn't really heard before, is the importance of that individuality motivation. And I wondered if that's something that you experienced a lot in kind of our small business culture.
Yeah, I would see that a lot of, if you don't want it enough, it's not going to happen. And you have to have the motivation behind it. And I've seen projects where they decide halfway through, this just seems hard, or this seems unattainable. And it's talking through, and it's all a mind game. And we have our own version of mind games that we play on a daily basis, whether it's irrational fear or not believing you can do something, all of that. And it holds you back from getting to where you need to go. And that shows up in businesses too, of ERP selections or various technology changes, because they are big things. And at the end of the day, people do not like change. There's a few people that get a thrill from it, but most people are like, I'm good at doing what I want to do. I got this spreadsheet, it works. Why would I want to change this? Because I feel, and we've talked about this in various other podcasts too, of people owning what they do and they don't want it being taken away from them. Even though it will not be taken away from them, it just gets transferred somewhere else into the realm of what their job title is.
And how do you help businesses communicate that? Say you are, working with a new, for small businesses, we're not looking at a ton of emerging technologies like AI, predictive analytics, but
Right.
even moving from QuickBooks to NetSuite is, a huge change a lot of times, with just the different automations that a lot of times they'll experience. So how do you still communicate that, hey, you do have a ton of value here. It's just a different role that you'll be playing, and these are your different responsibilities.
It's giving real examples from other projects I've been on, and then also taking them through of, here's what you do today. Here's what it's going to look like on this new system. How are you feeling about it? And it goes back to being more of that psychologist role for them. How are you feeling about this? Are you upset about it? Are you happy about this? Does it take something off your plate that you wish could have been let go months ago? What all of that. And I think that begins to help. And especially when they can understand how much what they're doing today is really, really painful. They're like, oh, yep, I understand more why this needs to go away. Or even you draw out the process on the board, and you have all of a sudden with this new system, like, hey, we got 10 processes. Now we're going to go down to 5 because all of these are going to go away. And you see people be like, yeah, that's awesome, because I don't like to do any of these, and start showing them that their skill set is still very valuable to get the end product done.
Yeah, and I think that makes a ton of sense. I'm curious, and Prisa just shared on LinkedIn one of your YouTube videos about how you've outgrown QuickBooks. So I'm curious, when it comes to specific systems, are some better than others for small businesses or more startup type businesses? And which ones would
Yeah.
those be, or maybe what considerations should these small business clients look for?
I think it depends what you're doing. Um, QuickBooks, you're always going to outgrow eventually, especially if you're an inventory based company, because QuickBooks doesn't handle inventory. There's a few get by softwares that you can plug into QuickBooks, like Fishbowl and things like that. And we talked about it in that podcast that she posted on there, of it'll buy you some time until monetarily you're ready to invest in a larger system to fully integrate. But I think overall, most ERP softwares will work for anybody. It's just going to be based off the look. Some of it comes down to look and feel. What do you feel more comfortable navigating through? Cost. And is this going to be able to grow with you, this software, or is this just another patch to get you to where you need to go? And we try to look at softwares of you having for 15 to 20 years and not having to go through the process again anytime soon.
And are there any systems that are just like a no-go for small businesses? I'm just thinking about, like, smaller businesses that might be kind of in that 50 million sweet spot. It sounds to me, and I definitely am not the expert you are, but something like an SAP S/4HANA could be a little bit overwhelming.
Yeah, some of those tier one softwares, no, you wouldn't need those. SAP, S4HANA is a really good one. That's for an extremely large company. I mean, you're probably close to sitting to $1 billion for a lot of them, or on the high end, over a half a million, easy. You also don't want software that requires you to make a lot of changes to it. So a really highly customized system like Odoo, that's harder for a smaller business because it's a lot of back end work. There's a lot of customization. You need somebody to be able to put it together, to pull it apart, to be able to get to what you need. And that just doesn't make sense because it's a lot of costs for you to incur that you don't need. Where you would go something like a NetSuite or an Infor. Those are ones that they have lower tiered softwares that make more sense, and they're taking care of all of it for you.
And when it comes to the finance piece, because I know that's one of your specialties, like we talked about, I can assume it can be very risky for a small business to purchase or invest in something like a new system. So how do you kind of help them work through, is this the best business decision? And then to understand all of the costs.
Yeah, so that what I always say is I like to do an analysis with them. How much are you currently spending today on all of your software? And then how much is the new software going to cost? And so let's say we currently spend $1 million on our old software. It's going to cost us $2 million for new software. 2 million seems like a lot, but really it's only a delta of $1 million because I'm adding on and I'm going to retire out most of this old software. So looking at things that way, also looking at what do I really need today versus what I want. Some other add-ons that people think of is like a quality module, an R&D, HR. Those are all things I don't necessarily need when I first implement my ERP. They could be phase 2, phase 3 when your ROI on your software is already starting to come in. And then you can expand and take those on. So looking at what do I really need today versus what I think I need, and scaling back from there. That's a good way to not overbuy. And then I would say looking at implementation, how ready are your employees, and they can participate in the implementation so you're not spending more and more time. Because if the vendor says, hey, this is an 8-month implementation and ends up taking you 12, those extra 4 months get really expensive. And if everybody can stay on par and keep up with what's going on, that makes it easy.
So when it comes to looking at costs of these projects, is budget ever a consideration in between picking a best of breed system or a full ERP suite? Do you often see that they might start with best of breed, maybe start with a supply chain management system or something like that instead of a full ERP system? Or how do you decide what is best for the organization in looking at those two options?
Yeah, I've seen some people come in and they'll start with a PLM first, and then they'll go to a full ERP, or they want to start with the ERP but just the finance component of it. And they're like, especially if it's multi-location or multi-companies that roll up into consolidated, they're like, hey, it'd make the most sense. Let's get everybody on the same financial piece, and then 3 months later, 4 months later, we'll add in another component of it, and maybe they piecemeal the ERP together until it's all done. And that's one way to do it, to spread out costs. And there's also ways that you can talk with your tax consultant, because there's certain parts of ERP that can be capitalized versus expensed, and you can look at it from that way and kind of strategize around it.
And what if a small business is lacking in their overall IT capabilities? How do you come in and say, hey, just so software needs maintenance, it needs these types of things, without kind of having the vendor swoop in and say, oh no, this is all automated and those types of things? How do you just make sure they understand that resourcing cost as well?
Yeah, we usually talk about that right up front before we ever start the project. And most vendors do have support plans. So if you're a smaller business, you don't have an IT department, or you don't even have one dedicated person, there is support that you can purchase, and you can keep that. And then when it makes sense, you bring somebody on Those are ways around it, but it's always good to talk about it at the very beginning when we do start one of these projects, because some companies are like, yeah, we've been wanting to hire an IT person, but we didn't know when we should do it. And putting into, hey, we're going to be working on the selection process, and maybe at week 8, we start bringing somebody in, and then they get on board. So they're going to work through the implementation and be fully trained on the client side to help run the project and run the back end of it. So if somebody needs a new user license, they can log in and get it all done and get them set up properly.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense, and just needing to understand what that looks like. How can you explain kind of the dynamic between a technology independent and agnostic consultant and a software vendor? I think a lot of times another misperception is, we hate software vendors or something like that. We actually work very closely with them.
Mhm.
I think a lot of times people just don't understand that we're there for the business as opposed to the vendor, and just kind of speak that language, which I assume would be really
Yeah.
valuable in a small business dynamic.
So depending on the type of project, there may be us and then just the vendor, or you would have a partner come in, and the partner would be the person that would implement the software. So a good example is I purchase software A. Software A sells me the licenses. They give me a partner that does the full implementation for the client, and I would stick around throughout the whole selection, guiding the process, making sure they get the best price, making sure they're getting exactly what they need, and then staying on through the implementation to QA, QC, and PM various things, and to make sure that what we agreed upon when the contract was signed, that everybody's holding to those measures, and helping the client by filling in gaps. So when it's a small organization, sometimes they can't go to all of the meetings. So then I become the person that stands in that gap, and I'm at all of the meetings, and then help direct them of where they need to go. And even some, I've been so involved that I'm doing data migration with them. I'm helping them
Oh,
hire new employees, all that. It's really fun. And so everybody, it's a variety, every client.
and didn't you like sit on the interview board for one of your clients for like their
Mhm.
CEO or something like that?
Yeah, yeah, we were shopping for a CFO and going through various resumes, and then I would interview them first, and then they would interview them.
That's excellent. I mean, I think that relationship is just so valuable and powerful, especially in, like we talked about, kind of this vulnerable space in being a small business owner, understanding that you need to grow your system's footprint in order to grow your business, but having no idea where to start. So,
Yeah.
speaking of that, what would be your piece of advice for a small business consultant or a small business owner? What would be the first step in considering a digital transformation?
I think it's understanding where your business is today. What are all the pain points, the bottlenecks that are keeping you from getting to the end goal that you want to be at? And then the accountant in me is I always work backwards. So if I know where I want to be, then I work back from words from there to find what's going to be the best solution path to get to the end product. And I know most people don't work that way, but I think accounting you always do, because you look at the bottom and you work backwards to find your errors. And I do the same thing in a business way. So if you can identify that, of let's say you're a $50 million company and your goal in 5 years to be a $75 million company, how are we going to get there? And then work backwards from there and saying, yep, the only way to get there is I need to put a different piece of technology in. I need to be able to hire a person to do this and this. And then kind of put a plan of prioritizing what those needs are.
That's definitely, a great first step. And then, I'll add from my sales and marketing side, reaching out to an expert. It would just be the same as if you were building a new manufacturing plant, you'd need a contractor. Those types of things is people just
Yeah, because otherwise you can make poor choice is the
yeah.
wrong word, but it can go down the wrong path. And when you hire somebody like us to come in, we can make sure that the vendor is giving you exactly what you need. You're not being upsold things you don't
Mhm.
want, or you're not aware of certain things that may need to be included, and then now you've purchased a software that's not the best fit for you.
Yeah, and our friend Marcus Harris over at Tough Law always talks about, investing in someone and in his world to take a look at your contracts is going to be much cheaper to make sure that it's done correctly at the beginning than bringing someone in, which we often come into organizations that have a failed implementation, a stalled implementation. And then we also act here, and Kristy's, I think, been on a few of these teams of expert witnesses. So basically, if they've gone to litigation and there is a lawsuit, a lot of times they'll hire one of our experts to come in and say, yes, this was done poorly. Yes, this should have been this way. But hopefully it never comes to that, right? Because you were able to get that insight in the forefront of the project as opposed to trying to clean it up.
Yeah, and just for all you small business owners out there too, the agreements that the vendors give you, they can always be redlined. They can always be redlined, and different verbiage can be added to help you. And that's the thing of having either a good law or legal team that's internally working outside with one, or using one of our resources to help get that all planned.
Yeah, definitely. And we, when this live stream is over, if anyone is watching it afterwards, we'll go ahead and tag Marcus. He also spoke at our Digital Stratosphere 2022 event that we recently had in February, that Kristy spoke at with one of our other colleagues, Amanda, about small and mid-market businesses. So definitely check that out as well. You can go to stratosphere2022.com and register. It's still free. You can watch all the recordings, but both Marcus and Kristy speak at that conference. So definitely something to check out. So to close, Kristy, I'd just love for you to kind of speak to anyone that is considering a career in consulting and give kind of your number one or top pieces of advice in seeing if this career field is right for you.
Yeah, I think do it. It's really rewarding. It's a lot of fun. It really fits a lot of personalities, I think, of people that they don't want to be in that 9 to 5. They want a little bit more freedom. They want the ability to work with more diverse clients, and this allows for that. And then I always say ask lots of questions. Reach out to people that are in that field, talk to them what their experience is like. And then just start, working in it and see how you like it. And yeah, I think that's the best way. I always say, just jump in, see what happens. Are you able, or what do I always tell people? I'm like, just jump off the mountain and build your wings on the way down. You'll figure it out. And I think that's kind of how I did with consulting.
Excellent. Well, I think we're so grateful for all of your insight, and just for our audience watching, if you are interested in joining the Third Stage Global team, we do have offices in North America, in South Africa, in Europe, and Australia, which is our Asia Pacific market. But we do have global consultants that we work with all around the world that are Kristy's peers and our colleagues that really do have specialties, whether it's a specific type of business size like Kristy, or a vertical in an expertise in accounting and finance, or if it's a supply chain management, or it's even a cultural immersion. We absolutely can accommodate those types of clients. And if you're interested in joining that team, we have our careers page on our website, and then we also have work at thirdstageconsulting.com. We don't have a formal application process. Just as you can probably see from this interview, we really hire for a cultural fit that is going to maximize business value for our clients. So we really do handpick each person that is an applicant. But we hope to hear from you. And Kristy, we're so grateful for your time today. And then thank you to Parisa as well, who's been kind of behind the scenes helping us to give some supporting homework content, as I always call it. So thank you so much. We do live streams every Friday. If you subscribe to our YouTube channel, you can set a reminder and you can meet a new team member each week. So thanks again, Kristy, for your time. And we will see you next time.
Sounds good.